Hello my beautiful friends, welcome back to another video. A lot of you guys know that I am engaged. I am currently planning a wedding that will hopefully take place in the fall of this year 2020. In light of everything going on right now with coronavirus, this whole pandemic, there have been a lot of changes to our schedules. A lot of us have had work changes in our families. There have been changes across the board on so many different settings. So this doesn't change for weddings, and I've received some questions about how we've been making all of this work despite this whole pandemic. There are a lot of people that have scheduled weddings for this spring and this summer and have actually ended up needing to cancel their weddings or postpone it or involve some sort of change to their wedding day. While there is a lot of stuff going on, a lot of horrible things, there are people losing their lives, there are people losing their jobs, there are people that have been emotionally challenged by this whole situation. There are a few things that I want to talk to you guys about, whether you are planning a wedding or whether you're hoping to plan a wedding. Maybe these tips can be helpful to you in regards to this whole season that we're in of this virus. The first thing I would say in this whole discussion about weddings during the season would be to ask for help. This is a hard thing for some of us to do. I speak for myself. I'm the kind of person that I'm very self-sufficient. I want to do things on my own. I feel like I can do things better if I do it myself. I don't really like relying on other people. I'm a very independently minded person most of the time. Because of this could be a blessing and a curse at the same time, because when it comes to planning a wedding, there is obviously help that is needed when planning such a huge event with so many different details all intermingled in that one day. So because of that, a wedding is already stressful. So then when you add a pandemic to the mix, it's like super 10 times more stressful, because you have to think about all of these things that have to get done while coping with what's going on around you. With these changes that have had to occur for some of your weddings, some people's weddings, a lot of it is due to vendors, due to guests, whether guests can make it or not, whether vendors can service the wedding or not. A lot of these changes have a lot of different variables. So I would say that the most important thing is really to ask for help, whether this be a wedding planner or a friend or a family friend or a bridesmaid or your fiance, because you know it's his wedding day too, and I'm sure he wants to help. As much as we want to do everything on our own as a bride, our fiancés are there to help us too. Something that I'm hoping to do in the next couple of weeks, being that my wedding is in the fall and we don't really know when all of this is going to pan out, I am planning on reaching out to different vendors just to talk to them about payments, about upcoming payments that are approaching, and the flexibility that they might have in allowing us to send them these payments at a later date. So this again does depend on your vendor. This is not something that is going to be the same for every vendor. Maybe they need the money, but maybe they'll be very understanding. I have reached out to one vendor already about a payment that I wasn't able to send them right away just because of our situation currently, and she was extremely understanding. When I tell you she was the sweetest person on earth, she was very understanding, very graceful. So I encourage you guys, if you are looking at all these upcoming payments and maybe you aren't receiving the salary that you should be because of this whole pandemic, or maybe you lost your job, or maybe you just have had to allocate funds to another area in your life currently, a lot of vendors I'm sure will be more than willing to understand your situation. A third thing that I would say to help you during this time of wedding planning and a pandemic would be to cut back on unnecessary items. I know this might be very difficult for some of us who love to have those little extra items that are very special and make the day all the more cute and wonderful. But the thing is that a wedding is not about the little details as much as it seems like it should be because of all the attention that we put on those details. It's really not about these things. I was looking at a wedding hanger, like, you know, like those wedding dress hangers that are personalized that have like a Mrs. so-and-so or your name. And so I was looking at these wedding hangers on Etsy, and you'd be surprised, like these wedding hangers were around $30 to $40. And I had to make the decision and tell myself, listen, you cannot spend $30 to $40 on a clothing hanger because that's not what your wedding is about. That's not what it's about. We're in this season of saving and this season of financial difficulties. The most important thing that you can do is really cut back on those things that you don't really need for your wedding day. And I think another note to add to that is that your wedding day should not be based on the materials that you're using for your wedding day, right? Like your wedding day is not special because of the clothing hanger that you bought for your wedding dress. Your wedding day is really not special for the kind of flowers in the bouquets of the bridesmaids. Your wedding day is not made more special by a $50 garner that you use just for the sake of the night. No, these things don't make your wedding day more special. These things are nice to have, but in the case of financial difficulty, in the case of financial hardship that a pandemic can cause, these things aren't necessary. If anything, it's just adding to a stress that we don't need in a time that's already so turbulent and already so stress-provoking that we don't need to deal with. Another tip I would love to give you guys is compacting your guest list. So in the midst of this pandemic, and if you're looking at a wedding maybe in June or July, we're not really sure which guests will end up going and which will not end up going. I think a lot of people are fearful right now, and a lot of people may decline your invitation to your wedding. So this is not something to be taken with a heavy heart, nor a negative attitude. I think the important thing to see here is that a wedding is not really about who's there. Of course, there are a lot of people that are special to us that we would love to have there, and I would say that is your priority in who you would want there. But if you're thinking of all your cousins and all your second aunts and all your third uncles, like that's gonna get too overwhelming. At the end of the day, we have to realize that our guest count isn't really what matters. And I think in terms of finances, your guest count is really what determines how expensive your wedding will be. A lot of the things that you're incorporating in your wedding are per person, and so the more people that you have, the more expensive everything will end up being. When we're trying to save money and we're trying to have this whole wedding planning thing and this whole pandemic be a little less stressful, I think it's important not to focus so much on the guests. Whoever wants to come, whoever you decide that you want to invite for your wedding day, great, so be it. But if there are people that are reaching out to you that they can't make it, or if you feel like having 150 is a little too much for you at the moment, that you would have to bump that down to 100, that's fine too. Your wedding day is not about the people that you have there. And I feel like this is very easy to say, but as someone who's going through this whole situation as well, it's very easy to get caught up in the things that family are saying and the wishes of your second cousins to go to your wedding. Your aunt that you haven't spoken to in 6 years is reaching out to you saying that she better be invited to the wedding. I know all of those things, and I know these things happen, so it makes it all the more difficult to be able to refine your guest list. But I would say that this is something that takes intention and something that takes conviction to understand that a wedding day is not about those who are invited. Times of crisis really require sacrifices. They really require you to make some exceptional decisions, extraordinary decisions that you would not have normally made in normal conditions. So if your family loves you, truly loves you, I'm sure that they will understand your decisions and they will want all the best for you, and they won't feel like their interests trump your interests for your wedding day. Your wedding day should be about you and your fiance, the love that binds you, the union that's going to embody this love. And that, I would say, would be the most important thing about your wedding day. That segues perfectly into my last point, that your wedding day is not about any of these things that I just mentioned, about the materials that you use, about the details, about the guests, about the money. It's really not about all of these things. What a wedding day is about is really about the union, the binding union that you're making with your fiance to embark on a lifelong journey together. This is something that's very sacred, something that should not be centered on materialism, should not be centered on how much money you can spend on this day, because at the end of it all, it's really not going to matter. It's really not going to matter how much you spent. I mean, it will matter when you're looking at the credit card statements and you're thinking, why the heck did I spend all that money? But in the case that you do choose to save some money, cut back on some things, it's not something that you're going to dwell on and say, oh, I really wish I had spent $40,000 on my wedding day rather than $20,000 on my wedding day. I don't think I've ever met someone, I don't think I've ever heard someone that regretted spending less than they did. If anything, I feel like a lot of people enjoy their wedding days more when everything is a lot more simpler, when things are a lot more affordable, when they're not so stressed about the money of it all, the glitz and the glam of it all, when it's something that's so simple and centered on the love between you and your fiance and the union to embody that love. That's when it really becomes the essence of what a wedding day should be. So I hope these little points are helpful to you in planning your wedding. Please do not take anything that I said in the wrong way, in a way that I'm trying to offend someone. If you do really care about that clothing hanger for your wedding day, by all means, if you have the budget, go for it. But I speak in terms of making this whole process a little bit easier during this whole pandemic. Again, like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, a wedding is definitely not at the top of the list of concerns right now. There are a lot more trying things at the moment, a lot more difficult things to grasp at the moment, but a wedding day is all the same a very special day between your fiance that you have been planning for a year now or 2 years now. So I understand completely the need, the desire to want to do it well and do it in a way that doesn't rob you of your joy. So I hope this video is helpful to you guys in some way, shape, or form. Please give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if this was helpful to you, and I will see all you lovely people in the next video.